Growing up, even though I don't necessarily know exactly when it was, I unfortunately did start to take the anxiety and nervousness from being put on the spot and turning it into the fear of failure. And this did unfortunately affect not only my education, but my music career as well, and even the future decisions that I decided to take unknowingly being affected as well. Even though I know that I was capable of taking these opportunities and tasks that I was given, the simple thought of making a mistake scared me away from taking the opportunity in general, or just caused me to not do well on them. Today, I would like to talk about my three main points that helped me through my journey of overcoming self-doubt as well as a fear of failure. These three main points are acceptance, practice, and the environment that you are in as well. The first main point that I would like to talk to you about today is the acceptance, and not only the acceptance, but identifying your self-values and accepting them. Identifying your self-values was something for me that was not easy at all. And this came from the mentality that I previously had on being put on the spot in general. I used to look at being put on the spot as something more negative, as a more negative experience in the sense of being put on the spot to be judged because you were in such a vulnerable position to be judged or criticized by other people. But then I soon realized that it didn't have to be that way. It could be a moment of growth and realization. When I did well, when I was put on the spot, that meant that I had done what I needed to and it was a moment of growth. But when I didn't, that meant that it was a moment of realization for me to realize that I needed to work on what I did not do well on. Or in other words, I needed to practice. Now that I have talked to you about my first main point being identifying my self-values and accepting them, I would like to talk to you about my second main point, which is practicing, and as well as the growth that I got for practicing. So although I knew that I did need to practice, I didn't know exactly what until I did identify what those things were. On top of that, I did learn that not only did I need to practice physically, but I also needed to practice mentally. I did need to practice physically in the sense that I needed to practice my instruments and I needed to practice my skills in music and everything that came along with, for example, going through an audition. But I also needed to practice mentally being nicer to myself. Instead of being so hard on myself before, during, or after an audition, for example, I learned that I had to be nicer in the way that I talked to myself, being more supportive that I could do it instead of that I couldn't, and that if I did mess up, and already just having that negative thought process in my mind. A professor of mine told me that if I didn't feel comfortable or confident enough, that simply meant that I hadn't practiced enough, and I took those words of advice and applied them to my future thought process, and it really did help change the way that I thought and looked at things. Now that I have talked to you about identifying my self-values and accepting them, as well as practicing and the growth that I got from practicing, I would like to talk to you about my third and final point. My third and final point is the importance of the environment you're in and how it really does affect you mentally. Unfortunately, 6 out of those 7 years that I have been a musician, I was in the same environment until this past year where I went into a new environment, which was actually the point of realization where I realized how important this was. Those 6 out of the 7 years, I was always taught that criticism was helpful in a way where if you were told that making mistakes wasn't okay, then it was the right thing. And it wasn't until I was in this new group where I learned that making mistakes were accepted and were actually preferred in order for you to learn that the mistakes you were making was something that you needed to practice. Without making mistakes, you weren't able to identify the things that you needed to work on and be better at. And it wasn't until this point where I realized that I wanted to make mistakes and I was actually happy when I did, because it helped me identify the things I needed to work on instead of being so scared for so long to make those mistakes. In conclusion, although I did allow self-doubt and the fear of failure to overcome my confidence both mentally and physically. I'm glad that it did because it allowed me to grow not only as a person but as a musician, and it gave me an experience that I now have for the future in order to prevent from this happening again. I have shared now the following topics with you, being acceptance, practice, and the environment that you're in, and how it has helped me become a better musician and a person. But the confidence level that I have now as well is much more than I did before. This experience has helped me shape into a better person, in that sense being that I am no longer scared to make mistakes. I am no longer to make errors. Now I'm excited when I do, because it helps me realize that I have more to work on rather than being afraid to make mistakes and putting myself down for those mistakes. As a result of my speech, I hope that you will now think, consider, and realize that you are in the part of the issue, in the sense that you should be more supportive, not only to yourself but to others. Being more supportive to yourself makes you much more of a positive and happy person, and it will also help you be that way towards others, because you simply never know when you give someone a compliment or words of motivation or even words of criticism, how a person will take those words, and that really does affect a person. Thank you.